Git is a powerful tool, especially when you are collaborating with others. So this is when you are all working on the same project and need to keep it up to date when you are all updating the same content. With Git, with collaboration, each user has a copy of their own repository and they all have their own timeline of snapshots. Then with Git, we usually have a master repository that everyone pushes and pulls changes to and from, and so you want this master repository to be available from anywhere in the world, and this is why it's hosted on a cloud-based platform like GitHub, GitLab or Bitbucket. We will be using GitHub. We will be having a look at GitHub, and GitHub is a free and open source cloud-based service which is used for this very purpose. The first thing we will do is have a look at GitHub. What is GitHub? GitHub provides a platform for developers to host, manage and collaborate on code repositories. Git is a free and open source version control software that tracks changes to your source code. GitHub allows for real-time collaboration and is accessible from anywhere in the world, which enables teams to work together effectively. Using GitHub is optional if you only need to track your code locally, such as hosting repositories within your company's network over a VPN connection. Then it's not needed. You do not need anything in the cloud. Then it's not required. So GitHub is not mandatory for Git, but Git is mandatory for GitHub. You need Git to use GitHub. You do not need GitHub to use Git. And GitHub offers both free and paid plans, including free, pro and enterprise options. The free plan includes the basics such as unlimited public and private repositories with 500 megabytes package storage and 2000 automation minutes. The team plan offers advanced collaboration features with 2 gigabytes of storage, where enterprise plan includes all features of the free and team plans, along with enhanced security, compliance, flexibility deployment, and its 50 gig of storage. The platform supports both public and private repositories and was acquired by Microsoft in 2018, which increased Microsoft's focus and commitment to open source development. And additionally, GitHub includes features like continuous integration and deployment, as well as various collaboration tools. So that's a high level overview of what GitHub is. Let's go ahead and create a GitHub account. And once we create a GitHub account, let's go ahead with creating a new repository and connecting this new repository in the cloud back to my local Git environment on my local machine. The very first step is to create an account on GitHub. For this, we'll go to github.com, and before I sign up, if I hover down, GitHub shows some of the latest and greatest features that comes with the service, so you can read more about those. Now I will click on the sign up button on the top right of the screen. Next, we specify our email address and create a password, and enter a username for your GitHub account and click continue. After this, we verify the account and confirm the code they sent to your email address, and now you are done with this part and you can sign in. Now upon signing in, you will get asked some questions. You can skip it. This part is to set up your environment with the correct level of services that you want to use. I think it's basically to upsell their other services or their other pricing models. They offer the 3 models: free, team and enterprise. Anyway, regardless, we are going to stick with the free one, but I'll go through this anyway. So it asks, how would you describe yourself? So I'm going to select student here just to see what options we get with student. It does, by the way, ask you to apply for the student services. To get the student services, we will see this in the next couple of screens. So let's go with student for now, but ultimately I'm going to go with the free option. How many team members will be working with you? Let's go with 2 to 5. And we can see here what specific features are you interested in using. I assume if you select any of these, it will try and upgrade you. It will try and ask you to upgrade to another pricing model. We will have a look at the pricing models as well. And here's an image of the pricing model. So you get these 3 pricing models: free, team and enterprise. Now if we click continue, next it shows us our free options, and because we did not select any of the other features in the previous window, it shows us only the free options and the get additional student benefits options. But we would have to apply for this. I guess we would have to show that we are a student. But I'm going to select the continue for free option. And that's it as far as initially setting up the account. And now it's landed us on the GitHub dashboard. So I'm logged into my GitHub environment and we are on the dashboard. So this is the GitHub dashboard. We can see it gives us some suggestions like explore other people's repositories, or start a new repository, and we can specify the repository name and whether we want this repository to be public or private, and create a new repository right from here. And introduce yourself with a profile readme so everyone knows what my page is about. And then we've got some useful tools. By the way, that's start writing your code. Then we've got some useful tools of the trade, and we'll be having a look at this actually. Install GitHub Desktop maybe in the next video. Then there's some AI based code suggestions. Try GitHub Copilot for 30 days and so on. So this is the dashboard. Of course, at the bottom it's showing trending repositories as well. But on the left hand side, we've also got create your first project. So we can do this, or we can import a repository as well, but we will create a repository. So here is where we create our new repository. The first thing I'll do is give it a repository name. It could be a name of your project. I'm going to be very generic and call it my first project, but of course you can be very specific. So if it's a particular game you're building, a particular website, etc., you want to label it correctly, and then you want to give it a nice, precise and memorable description. And then you can choose whether you want this to be public or private. Again, public is anyone on the internet can see the repository, but you can choose who can commit to your repository. So although they can view it and pull from it, they cannot commit to it. But then you've got private as well, and private you can choose who can see and commit to this repository, but we will stick with public. So by creating a public repository, anyone on the internet can see that repository. However, you can control who can commit and make changes to that repository. But by creating a private repository, you have complete control over who can see and make changes to that repository. Then we have three more things. We've got the README file. With the README file, you can write down what your project is about and provide any instructions. So let's tick it anyway. Then with the .gitignore file, this will contain the names of the files you do not want to push to GitHub. So with Git, we track changes to files. And by using the .gitignore file, we can specify files in here we ask Git to ignore. And Git will no longer track changes to those files. These could be operating system dependent files, or just notes you don't want Git to track. Or they can be settings specific to your IDE, or files specific to a version. They can even be system generated log files that just take up too much space and you do not want to track them. Things like that. So I'm going to use Terraform soon, so I can ask Git to ignore all my Terraform related files. Of course, we can click on these to learn more about each of these as well. Next, we need to specify a license. A license tells others what they can and cannot do with your code. But there is quite a few options with licenses. If we have a look in here, so this is for the GitHub repository we're creating. It can be licensed under a variety of open source licenses, and a license tells others what they can and cannot do with your code. But we have quite a few choices, so we can go through them. And the top one is the Apache License 2.0. With this license, users must maintain original copyright notice and include any changes in the software, and it's suitable for projects that might involve patents or where you want to prevent patent trolls. It's common in enterprise environments, software frameworks, and large projects like Apache projects. Then the General Public License, GPL, is best for projects where you want to ensure that all derivative works remain open source. It's widely used in the GNU or Linux ecosystem and other projects where open source principles are paramount. Then we have the MIT license, which is a very common license. A lot of people use this, and this is because it's a very permissive license that allows for almost complete unrestricted access of use. So users can pretty much do anything with it, including selling copies of the software, as long as the original copyright and license notice are included in all copies of substantial portions of the software. So the license is ideal for projects where you want to maximize freedom for users, including commercial use, and often used in web development, libraries, and open source projects where the creator wants widespread adoption. Then there's the BSD2 and BSD3 licenses. These are similar to the MIT license. The BSD licenses are permissive and allow for almost unrestricted freedom. The 2 includes basic permissions, while the 3 clause adds a no endorsement clause. These are good for projects where you want a permissive license with a bit more control over endorsements. They are often used in academic and government projects. A lot of these licenses are very niche and specific to things. The Creative Commons licenses, and these are a range of licenses mainly used for creative work rather than software. And they are best for documentation, images, media, or other creative content within a project. So it's not recommended for software code. The Eclipse Public License, this is a copyleft license similar to the LGPL, but with different patent and compatibility provisions. And this license is suited for enterprise grade projects, especially in the context of software that could potentially be integrated with other proprietary software. The AGPL Affero General Public License. This is a version of the GPL designed for software that is used over a network, and it's best used for web-based applications where you want to ensure that the code remains open even if it's used on a server-side context. The Mozilla Public License. This is ideal for projects where you want to enforce open source on a file-by-file basis, but allows for integration with proprietary systems, and it's commonly used in projects like Mozilla Firefox. Now at the very bottom we've got the unlicense, and this places the work in the public domain, allowing anyone to do anything with the project without any restrictions or conditions. So it's useful when you want to completely relinquish all rights and allow other users to use your work without any conditions at all. It's not very common you would use this, but it is sometimes used for small scripts or snippets where the authors want to avoid any restrictions. So to choose the right license, for maximum freedom of permissive use, you could use the MIT license, Apache 2.0 or the BSD license. These are ideal licenses for maximum freedom of use. For ensuring open source continuity, we would use GPL, LGPL or AGPL. For a balanced approach, you could use MPL or EPL. For documentation or creative content, you should use the Creative Commons licenses. And for total public domain dedication, so it's completely unrestricted, you would use the unlicensed license. So for most people, they use the maximum freedom, which is MIT or the BSD license, I suppose. So if we hover to the top, so I'm going to go with MIT license here. And then at the bottom it says this will set main as the default branch. Change the default name in your settings. So we could do this, but I like to use the default branch name as main, as I have done in my Git environment as well. It's called main. My default branch is called main. And finally, we can create the repository. So this is it. This is my first repository, my first project. It's called my first project, and I have my 3 files in here, my .ignore file, my license, and my readme file. And so this is information about my license. It tells me the permissions, the limitations, and the conditions for the MIT license. I've got my .ignore file here, and we can see it says local.terraform directory. So it's got all Terraform related things in here. TF state files, crash log files. Exclude all TFVAR files, which are likely to contain sensitive data. So these are templates. You can use templates, but you don't have to use these. I chose the Terraform template, but we could start from scratch with nothing in here, and you just specify your files in here. And on the right hand side, you can download your files from here, or copy the raw file, or edit this file as well. If I click on edit, I can remove all this information if I like, start from scratch, and specify a file in here like myfile4.txt, and we can commit changes on the right hand side over here, commit directly to the main branch, add a description, ignore myfile4.txt, commit change. Let's hover over to the readme file, and I can edit this as well, put some description in here. This is my first project. I'll leave this as it is and cancel changes from here. So this is all done. And on the left here, we can see our files, but we can also see the branch we are in. So I'm in the main branch. I do not have any other branches created just yet. And we can click on the plus sign as well here. And name our file and put some content within our file. And then we can commit changes. Commit directly to main branch, commit changes. So now we can see myfile5.txt in there. If we click on the GitHub icon, we can go back to the dashboard, and at the bottom here I can see my first project. If I go back in here, that's how we open up the project again from the dashboard. But on the right hand side here I've got code, and in here I can copy my URL. So I can copy it from here. But we've also got other methods as well. I can copy this, but we can do it via SSH or GitHub CLI as well. We can also download it as a zip file as well. And downloading it as a zip file is exactly the same as a git clone. So you can do that with no issues. So you don't have to use git clone command. This is a perfectly alternative way of doing it. Now to copy all my content, to clone all my content into my local repository on my local machine. So this is GitHub, my remote repository, and we are going to clone the content to my local repository on my local machine. So I have already copied the URL. I'll copy it again just to make sure. It's now copied to my clipboard. Again, I can do a download zip from here. I can also use other alternative protocols to do this with, maybe for security or compliance purposes. You can also open with GitHub desktop. If you do this, it would open up the URL and everything for you on your GitHub desktop on your local machine, and then you can just clone it with a click of a button. But we do not have GitHub desktop installed yet. I will cover this off in another video, but for now we have cloned it, and now I can go to my local machine on my git bash over here, and we can use the git clone command from here. Let's begin with doing a pwd to work out which directory we're in, and then do a dir. I've got a directory called my git project, so if we go into my git projects, we're in the directory I want to be in, and this is where we are going to create our new repository. So again, if I go to code and I copy the URL, we can see it's github.com followed by my name, followed by my project name, my first project. Now we can do a git clone from here and press enter, and that's done. So if I do a dir now, sorry, I have to go into my first project, but I'll just open up my folder instead. I've got my git projects in here. If I go into here, I've got my first project in here. Now if I double click my first project, we can see the files in here. So you can see the .ignore file, the license file. We can see the new file we created, my file 5, and the readme file as well. If I open up my file 5, I can see the same content in here as we had in the cloud. So that's how you clone a remote repository rather than starting from scratch. This is the alternative to using git init. So rather than using git init, starting a new project, you can clone an existing project for developers who want to work on existing projects. So that's how you use the git clone command to clone an existing repository in GitHub.